Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So this tweet late last week, or actually over the weekend, from Peachy Keenan, who is a op-ed writer for American Mind, hit upon something that you're not supposed to talk about. Oh, boy. Went viral because of the hue and cry of identitarian leftists in response to what she posted. The tweet: college admission season update from a friend. Niece got 1450 SAT, 4.2 GPA, competitive athlete. She didn't even get into her safety schools.
Ooh.
Going to a junior college this year and is very depressed. This actually happened last year, which she corrected. But regardless, this is the point. 1450 SAT, 4.2 GPA, competitive athlete. She didn't even get into her safety schools. Going to junior college this year, very depressed. The persons of color kids in her class, C students at best, are all headed to Berkeley. And that broke the internet with the "how dare you" and "you're making assumptions," and even some people saying 1450 isn't a very good SAT score.
It's a great essay. Are you kidding me? Please, you can get in an Ivy League school with that easily.
It's 95th percentile, but okay. And that, you're talking about these C students and so on and so forth. But it's true.
I'm surprised C students got into Berkeley, though.
Well,
that's a really difficult school to get into. But, okay.
Well, the point is not if you're of a certain pigmentation, if you're a person of color. I
know the game well.
The admission rates are different, and this is something we're not supposed to talk about. In point of fact, Elon Musk is talking about it. He talked about it in part in response to the Scott Adams controversy, in part in response to this, saying, look, it used to be blacks that were discriminated against when it came to things like college admissions, and now it's whites and Asians. How about just not discriminating? Harvard applicants in the top academic decile have different chances of admission depending on their race. Asians have a 12.7% chance of admission, whites 15.3%, Hispanics 31.3%, and blacks 56.1% in the top academic decile. So that's the pre-qual. But then once you clear that threshold, you go from Asians have a 12%, 13% chance to blacks having a 56% chance with whites and Hispanics in between. Is that the way we should do it? For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Professor William Jacobson, clinical professor of law and director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell Law School, founder of LegalInsurrection.com and president of the Legal Insurrection Foundation. And Legal Insurrection has just launched their Equal Protection Project to fight equity discrimination. And remember, equity and equality are antonyms, not synonyms. We're talking about equity when we're talking about this tweet and the debate that it generated, not equality. Professor Jacobson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on again.
What's your response to the college admissions flap, as a lot of parents are befuddled by the academic records their kids have put together and then the schools that they can gain entrance to with those records?
Well, we get a lot of reports of similar sort of things. It's hard to know kind of nationwide or on a mass scale what's happening, but certainly the statistics that have come out in the Harvard case, you just cited some of them, and they were really foundational to the Asian students bringing that lawsuit, do seem to indicate that there is racial discrimination in college admissions. And of course, we see it in many different areas. And that's one of the reasons that we form the Equal Protection Project, because we're seeing that the foundational goal of our society from the 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection of the laws down to local ordinances, which is non-discrimination, is being cast aside for political reasons by people who feel there should be certain racial mixes in various jobs in various universities and elsewhere. So this concept that we're not going to discriminate on the basis of race, which we should all be striving for, is being cast aside by this concept that we need to achieve a particular racial mix in a particular job or a particular university, and therefore we're going to discriminate against either white people or Asian people or whoever it happens to be. And that's just so damaging to our country. It really tears us apart. That's why we launched Equal Protection Project, which is equalprotect.org is the website.
But do you understand why Harvard's doing it? I mean, if there's nothing in place, the entire student body would be Asian, or mostly, not all, I shouldn't say that, but is that just, am I wrong in that thinking?
Well, I don't know. I certainly don't think the entire would be, but it would be relative to the population disproportionately of Asian background. But I guess the question is, so what? Okay, if you have certain measurements that you consider to be, legitimate measures of merit, whether it's grades or SAT scores or whatever it happens to be, and one group happens to outperform others, so what's wrong with that? Our view is as long as each individual is being treated fairly without regard to race, then group outcomes don't matter. We don't buy into, I don't accept that group measurements are the way to measure fairness. The way to measure fairness is how each individual is treated, which is what, at least until now, the law has always required. While there was a carve-out, a little bit of an exception for higher ed, which may go away soon with the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Harvard case. But individual fairness is what matters. That's what the Constitution guarantees. That's what our laws guarantee. And the fact that one group may outperform another is really not a measure of anything, and it's certainly not a measure of discrimination. You can't assume that there is discrimination because different groups have different outcomes. And all of the people who say, well, what else could it be? Well, you're asking us to disprove a negative. Why don't you prove how a particular person was discriminated against? Don't just assume it.
Yeah, the Constitution, our constitutional rights are our individual constitutional rights. They're shared among us all equally as individuals. It's not a zero-sum game, which is what these identitarian groupists want to make it. Also, I mean, we shouldn't be, how are we surprised by this? It seems to me the identitarian left just doesn't like the consequences of their viewpoints known. They don't want people to connect the dots. They want people just to think about, oh, well, this is a good idea to provide more opportunity to this group or that group. But then when they see, well, here's how we're going to do it by these hard-line discriminatory policies with specific quota percentages. Oh, well, I'm against that. Well, no, well, you just don't want to connect the consequences to the premises from which you start. Of course, this is what they're doing because this is who they are. This is who's in charge of all the colleges and universities in this country. This is the people that are assigning, Henry Rogers, aka Ibram Kendi, who, explicitly says the way to cure past discrimination is with present and future discrimination. And so that's what they're doing. Of course they're doing it.
That's right. And if you read the briefs that the various schools and hundreds of universities signed on and filed, so-called friend of the court briefs, they all say that we need to discriminate in order to achieve our educational goal of a diverse student population. So they admit they're doing it on the one hand. On the other hand, they said they don't talk about it. And this is, there are individuals who are being harmed, just like there were individuals being harmed in the 1950s when blacks were the target group of these sort of discrimination. But there are individuals being harmed. And one of the things that caused us to start equalprotect.org is when the Providence School District, we're based in Rhode Island, had a teacher hiring program where you could get loan forgiveness if you're a new teacher into the system, your student loans, but only if you're non-white. And their justification, and we're challenging it legally now, but their justification is, well, we need a certain mix of teachers that looks more like the mix of students. Yeah, but there's individual teachers who are being discriminated against. How do you think they feel? How does that advance our society when you turn us into the equivalent of Yugoslavia, where everybody identifies not with the nation, not even with the state, but identifies with their ethnic group. You're turning us into a very bad situation. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of resentment when your goal and your governmental policy and your corporate policy is to favor one racial group over another. It was wrong when it happened with blacks as the victim, and it's wrong now when it's happening with other groups as the victim.
So equalprotect.org, this project you're launching, I'm sort of surmising from what you just mentioned about the Providence school system, that you're soliciting people who have been discriminated against, like the Providence school system example, and equalprotect.org is going to provide legal representation to fight these sort of discriminatory policies?
Well, right now we're looking more at policies and procedures, things that affect large numbers of people. We're not going to provide necessarily legal representation ourselves. We may find it for people,
right?
But if you have a very specific employment problem that's kind of specific to you, that's probably not something that we would get involved in. On the other hand, if there is a policy in your school district, there's a policy in your governmental entity that is affecting a large number of people, then, we do certainly want to hear reports of that. And if we can get it resolved without the need for a lawsuit, so much the better. Sometimes a letter resolves it. Sometimes a publicity resolves it. Sometimes when bad practices are exposed, people stop doing it, but sometimes they don't. But we have seen many governmental policies. The Biden administration had one that was stricken down by the courts for, again, loan forgiveness, but it was only for non-white farmers, not for white farmers, and courts struck that down. So we're mostly focused on policies and procedures that are affecting a large number of people. But if you do have a problem, you certainly can reach out to us, and we might be able to connect you to somebody. But that's our main focus, is not being employment lawyers. Our main focus is stopping bad policies and procedures that are now spread everywhere in society.
Is the Harvard case that you mentioned before the high court that may overturn the upholding of affirmative action that the University of Michigan cases from the beginning of this century, is that having any kind of impact on Ivy League policies, admissions policies, as far as you can tell?
Well, yes, because they're now on the verge of eliminating the SATs, eliminating standardized testing, because one of the primary pieces of evidence that the Asian students in the Harvard case had were the statistics you mentioned, and that the SAT score statistics were the best proof of discrimination, because this all takes place behind closed doors. Nobody knows what the admissions committee discusses. And so now what are they doing in reaction to it? They're making SATs test optional, or they're going to eliminate them completely. Happening in law schools too. The American Bar Association is on the verge. It came up for a vote and actually lost, but they're bringing it up again, of eliminating the need for standardized law testing.
Oh my
so
gosh.
What they're going to do, the LSAT is already test optional. You can take the GRE, the graduate exam, instead. So you've got your choice, but you still have to take a recognized standardized test. The ABA, American Bar Association, is trying to eliminate even that requirement. So what they're going to do in response to a negative decision in the Harvard case is they will just, shroud everything in even more mystery. They will eliminate the, testing. They'll eliminate the proof of what they're doing behind closed doors. And let's remember, the Harvard model, and it's really called the Harvard model, was developed in the 1920s to limit the number of Jews getting into Harvard. And they're using exactly the same model now to limit the number of Asians. So this is not new. Harvard has paved the way in discrimination, and they're so elite they think they can get away with it. So none of this is going to stop with the Supreme Court decision. It may help around the margins, but the elite schools that have 30 people applying for each spot are going to keep on doing what they're doing. They'll just make it harder to find. Yeah,
I mean, it's a good explanation of how incorrigible the people in charge of these universities and colleges around the country really are. Good luck with the Equal Protection Project. Equalprotect.org is the new initiative launched by Professor William Jacobson at legalinsurrection.com. He's a professor of law and the director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell Law School. Again, founder of LegalInsurrection.com, president of the Legal Insurrection Foundation, and the new project, Equal Protection Project, equalprotect.org for more information on the project, on the initiative. Professor Jacobson, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
At Ethos Life, we busted all the myths about getting life insurance. Like myth number 1.
Life insurance? I can't afford that.
At Ethos, we have term life policies everyone can afford, with policies as low as $7 a month. Or myth number 2.
I have a life insurance policy through work. That's good enough.
With workplace coverage usually only equal to a year's salary, that won't nearly be enough to cover your family's ongoing and future expenses. A long-term, affordable policy from Ethos can give you the peace of mind that if something happens to you, your family is well covered for years to come. Myth number 3.
Getting life insurance? It's just too complicated.
At Ethos, our 100% hassle-free online process can give you a quote in seconds, application in minutes, and coverage in hours. With no medical exams or blood work needed, just answer a few health questions. Get your free online estimate at ethoslife.com. That's ETHOS life.com. Rates will vary based on age, underwriting, face amount, and type of policy.
Already? You don't have to, since you can lose a contractually guaranteed